Bluegrass Jamalong is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas. Bluegrass Jamalong is also brought to you by Token Picks, individually machined guitar and mandolin picks to bring out the best in you and your instrument.
I mean, just the nature of that song is it's almost like a pop song. It's like very simple. And there's actually a story that I heard from Jesse's wife about that, which is, I mentioned that Jim did the business and Jesse was kind of the music director, and evidently Jim was ribbing on Jesse. He's like, "Hey man, you're not coming up with enough new material for our band." And Jesse's like, "What? I'm writing songs all the time. Here, I'll write one right now." And he writes that song on the spot to spite his brother.
Hi, this is Matt, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jamalong, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass. Hey everybody, welcome back to Bluegrass Jamalong. I have 3 episodes for you this week, and that is because I went down to Sore Fingers a couple of weeks ago, which is a wonderful British bluegrass camp that has been running for 30 years and just brings together a wonderful community of people, some tutors that come over from the US, a bunch of students from all over the UK and Europe, for a week of picking and learning and playing, and it's just a glorious thing. And while I was there, I got to chat to a bunch of people, and I'm going to give you this week 3 different episodes, shorter than the usual interviews. The first one, which is this one, is going to be a chat with Michael Daves about his brand new record with Jacob Jolliff, which is a duet record, which is a tribute to Jim and Jesse, and it's just fantastic. So I got to chat to Michael about that, and we also chat about the R.E.M. kind of covers EP that he put out in December as well, which is fascinating, and his new label Wild Geranium Records. So that's coming up. Stick around for that. Then later in the week, we're going to have a chat with Tony Trischka about Volume 2 of Earl Jam. I chatted with Tony about Volume 1 last year, and Volume 2 is out now. We talk about that. And then the third episode this week is going to be about Sore Fingers itself, and I chat to the team kind of responsible for running Sore Fingers. I talk to some of the students, I talk to some of the tutors, and just to give you a flavour of all of that as well, because I talked to John Wirtz, who runs Sore Fingers, along with his partner Moira, about kind of the history of the camp and some of that kind of stuff a few weeks ago. And that was a lot of fun, but it was great to go down and just experience it and talk to some people. So yeah, you've got 3 shorter episodes coming this week, and this is the first one of them. This is my chat with Michael Daves about the Jacob Jolliff Jim and Jesse duet record. I will stick a link in the show notes to the Michael Daves related stuff we'll talk about in this episode, and I'll put a link in the third episode this week to all the Sore Fingers stuff, so you can go check that out as well, because it is a really remarkable event, and I really feel like you should check it out if you don't know it. But that is it. Here is me talking to Michael Daves about Jacob Jolliff and Jim and Jesse. Lots of J's in there. Enjoy. Michael Daves, welcome back to Bluegrass Jamalong. Great to see you.
You too. It's great to talk to you again.
And I'm looking forward to this one. It's really interesting record you've got out with Jacob Jolliff, like a tribute to Jim and Jesse. How did the project come about?
Well, it started, I interviewed Jesse McReynolds of Jim and Jesse in 2019 for my online school, Bluegrass Vocals with Artist Works. And one of the cool things about that job, in addition to working with students, is that you have kind of a calling card to go interview bluegrass legends. And so in 2019, I talked to Jesse and actually interviewed Bobby Osborne on the same day on a national trip. It was a big day. But anyways, Jesse, I always loved the Jim and Jesse music, and Jesse himself was just so sweet and so warm and just a delight to talk to. And he was 91-ish, 92, somewhere in there, at the time I interviewed him. He's still writing new tunes every day. Just always looking to try something new, and just clearly just loved music, and just very gentle soul, and like, man, that's I'd heard that about him, but it was nice to experience that in person. And then, following that, I guess this is kind of more coming out of the pandemic, for Artist Works. I do these monthly videos for my students, and I like to do series on just kind of further explore a particular artist. Like we did a year-long series commemorating the Doc Watson Centennial, and I was talking to a bunch of different people like, Brian and Billy and all these people. And then I did about a year on Jim and Jesse songs, and with different special guests, people who knew them or worked with them, or were just influenced by their music, like Andy Statman and John Reichman, among others. And anyway, so I just got this this repertoire going that I was teaching, and at the time, Jacob Jolliff and I were getting busy with our duo. Coming out of the pandemic, we were finding ourselves getting kind of falling backwards into a bunch of bookings, including some overseas stuff, and we're like, I'd like to make a record, and like I was in the midst of teaching this Jim and Jesse and stuff, and I'm like, wait, Jacob would be the perfect partner for this, and we started working some of that stuff into our set, and in fact, we had planned to make the record, and then I think it was 2023, we were at Rotterdam Bluegrass Festival when we got the news that Jesse had passed. And we were able to do a whole set of Jim and Jesse music that day, because we already had it worked up. We'd planned to go in the studio. We had hoped to be able to someday share our recording with Jesse. It ended up taking a while to actually make the record, but we had the repertoire together, and so it was nice to be able to do that tribute. And I don't know how many folks in the Netherlands were familiar with Jim and Jesse, but the set seemed to go over well. And it was good to be able to honor him in that way on that day.
Yeah, and when it's lots of people will know the previous duo record. You remember Chris Thiele, which was definitely kind of a tribute to the brother band kind of things. But this is much more kind of specific, deep dive into the repertoire of these two, and they're a fascinating combination of musicianship, songwriting, and vocals, aren't they? Yeah,
well, I'm a big fan of the guitar mandolin duo, and that's probably my favorite musical mode. And so but I'm really best known for the album with Chris Thiele, Sleep With One Eye Open, that came out in 2011, and Chris and I occasionally get the band back together, as they say. But I've also done stuff with Mike Compton and Andy Statman, Frank Sullivan. Sarah Jarosz was on my record Orchids and Violence, and we recorded a guitar mandolin duet as part of that, and just other I love that format. Jacob and I were, hitting it off, and, to record another guitar mandolin duo, I wanted to make sure that it had a distinct identity and character and purpose, to set it apart from the Thiele Daves project, which, also fished from classic bluegrass, but it wasn't like themed in this way. So, also, the Jim and Jesse music, Jim and Jesse, their vocal style is like very, like, they just do all these really straight, clean tones. It's like a laser beam, like the way they sing together, as contrasted to something like Jimmy Martin and Bill Monroe, who would have like a tremendous amount of movement, a lot of blues, smearing, tones. But Jim and Jesse will just like hit a note in an interval and just hold it, just straight and narrow, and it's just such a great resonance in the way they sing. And Jacob, he's a very flexible singer, but he's also just like rock solid. And he just, as a person, and a performer, he's just, no frills. He's just very straightforward energy. And so I thought that his vocal style and just his demeanor just actually made a lot of sense, interpreting the Jim and Jesse music. And then, of course, he plays all this outrageous progressive stuff. But, Jesse McReynolds, back in the day, he had this revolutionary style that in its day was very progressive. And it's kind of this, combination of, we're both very traditional and doing something totally new is what they were about initially. And so it just made sense to me with Jacob. And, Jacob grew up playing bluegrass gospel. So, he comes by the trad stuff very honestly, but there's, so anyways, but it just felt like it was a good container for us and, what we wanted to do. And, it's certainly distinct stylistically from the Thiele Daves record and other, guitar mandolin duos that I do.
And I think it's a really interesting point about Jesse and that kind of progressive style of his. I think most people who spend any time learning the mandolin come across Jesse, and you soon discover kind of this whole cross-picking style and this thing that he developed that is pretty well known amongst mandolin players. But I was wondering sort of like what you can tell me about Jim, because in any duo, there's two important roles and nowhere to hide. And I feel like Jesse is pretty known for what he's done. And I wonder if Jim may be slightly less celebrated.
Yeah, well, part of this because I think as far as the division of labor, as I understand it, with Jim and Jesse, is that Jesse was the musical director of the band and Jim was the business manager. So Jim did like all the booking, all the behind the scenes stuff. It sounds like Jesse is the one, as I understand it, who was like most motivated initially to like pursue music as a career. And I think that, when they came back from the service, Jim was like working as a truck driver, and Jesse was like, well, come on, are we going to do this? Do you want to be a truck driver for the rest of your life, or are we going to play music? And Jim's like, okay, we'll play music, so, and he, I think he had and I never met Jim. I think he passed in, I want to say 2002. And, I was never gotten out and I had a chance, to be around him or hear him perform, unfortunately. But, it sounds like Jesse was like the creative spark there, but, being a brother duet, I mean, it's all about just the interaction of those energies. And I think it's often the case in duos and also in siblings that you have kind of like a yin and a yang, like kind of like the Leuven brothers. I mean, Ira Leuven was just this outrageous sort of loose cannon, brilliant creative person. And then Charlie was kind of like the stable one. But you wouldn't have the Leuven brothers music without that dialogue between those different energies. And it's like the sum of the parts ends up being greater. So I think, that Jesse had that artistic spark, that drive to do music, to create, but like it was all about the interaction with Jim in whatever way that kind of Jim just kind of, held the line, especially stylistically, just being just so rock solid as his singing, just so pure, it just gave Jesse, I think, something to kind of work off of that, Well,
I guess you go back to the sort of classic years of some of the brother duets as well. And bluegrass guitar as a thing was slightly different, wasn't it? You didn't get the kind of, people didn't take the spotlight soloing on guitar in the way that they have since. So just the dynamic amongst that was probably different at that point anyway.
Oh, absolutely. And Jim and Jesse almost always performed as a whole band. They were billed as the brother duet, but they always had a top flight band. That with, they had Vassar Clements on fiddle early on, and then Jimmy Buchanan and Alan Shelton and just this whole cavalcade of amazing musicians. Bobby Thompson on banjo, but the center of their music was always that vocal blend. And even as extravagant of a mandolin player as Jesse was, that it just came to the vocal blend and so. And I feel that actually that's kind of how things work out with me and Jake as well, is even though Jake and I each pick quite a bit and improvise, and I mean, Jake especially, he's just he's got this, outrageous vocabulary and facility on the instrument and just like this endless stream of ideas. But I feel like in this project, I feel like the vocals are really central. And I really like singing with Jake, and I think that's if it works, it's largely on account of our vocal blend and presentation being central. And so I think that I like that because I think it kind of contextualizes the hot playing in a way that like it's not just about it's kind of almost happening around that central harmony. And there's just something so compelling about two voices when they blend well. And the Jim and Jesse music, as I said, it's just like all these long, straight tones that like they didn't need to move. They didn't need to put a lot of ornamentation in there, but just like the way those voices combined was in itself compelling. They could just stay on one note, like kind of the whole song, it would like droning or something, and it would still be interesting. So there's something human in that.
Well, and you talked earlier about the kind of clarity of their harmony, and they're not doing these big sort of leaps and swapping over parts. There's, and this track, I'll Love Nobody But You, that, there's pretty quick, but the clarity and the kind of sort of simplicity in a way to where there's not this huge amount of ornamentation, but it's a very exciting vocal blend that you guys have on there. We'll be right back with you just after this. The long-awaited Hill Country series from Collings Guitars represents a new voice in their acoustic lineup. Rooted deep in the bluegrass world, these new Dreadnought and R.E.M models feature a strong fundamental tone with a dry, warm and woody character that's sure to catch the attention of players who hold the vintage instruments of the 30s in their highest regard. Watch world-class pickers Jake Workman, Kenny Smith and Bob Minner perform with new Hill Country instruments on the Collings Guitars YouTube channel, and learn more at collingsguitars.com. Founded in Petaluma, California, and born of a love for music, Token has developed a unique approach to making picks. Individually machined from premium materials like Ultem, Peak, and compression moulded Taulon, Token picks are designed to bring clarity, speed, and tone to your playing. Used by top artists like Chris Eldridge, Jake Workman, Andy Falco, and Trey Hensley, Token picks are fast becoming a bluegrass favourite. Follow on Instagram at TokenMade and learn more at tokenmade.com.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I barely made it through that one. I was wondering, I'm not sure this is going to make it on the record because it was the end of or that one session. My voice was getting tired, but it was just funny how that sometimes works out despite your best efforts. But that song in particular, I'll love Nobody But You. I mean, just the nature of that song is it's almost like a pop song. It's like very simple, and there's actually a story that I heard from Jesse's wife about that, which is, I mentioned that Jim did the business and Jesse was kind of music director, and evidently Jim was ribbing on Jesse. He's like, "Hey man, you're not coming up with enough new material for our band." And Jesse's like, "What? I'm writing songs all the time. Here, I'll write one right now." And he writes that song on the spot to spite his brother. And it's the simplest song you can imagine, but it ended up being a hit, of course. And part is because, and that worked for them because they have this kind of pop like simplicity to their presentation, like the facade of it. It's very palatable compared, they're not, bad boys, and, it's very like kind of family friendly presentation, and that sort of the pop-ishness of that song is a good, case in point for, their vibe. But, it's still somehow compelling. It's still got some substance, underneath, and part of that's, all the hot playing. But, and again, the blend, and just the way those voices, collide, and, the overtones just kind of multiply, and, it's just like, you just want more of it. So,
well, and you're still talking about coming to the end of that session and wondering if you're going to make it through, and because there's no overdubs on this record. I'd love to talk a little bit how you recorded this, because it's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Oh yeah, we recorded in this. It's in a church hall in Brooklyn, built in the late 1800s that I've used for a number of recordings, including all three of the releases on Wild Geranium, my label, and also Orchids and Violence, which was this double record I put out in 2016, and Burning House, which is an EP I produced for Jen Larson, is all recorded in this space. So it's a large space with balcony and like big vaulted ceilings, and so I like to just I really enjoy singing in that room. There's something about like the way the sound bounces back. But yeah, we just set up in the middle of this large hall. We're singing into the same mic, just facing each other. The mic's in figure 8, so you can sing into either side of it. And we have close mics on the instruments, and then a pair of ribbon mics back, about 6 feet, and then a room mic, off in the distance to kind of capture the distant echo. But it was all done live. No overdubs, just, singing into the same mic, and, it's deliberately make it so that you can't go fix things, later. Puts the pressure on the live performance. We did edit some between takes. So, we didn't use a click track or anything, but our tempos were, I guess, consistent enough that, if we liked the solo better from this other take, or maybe like, there's some of the songs have a lot of words in it. We had a hard time getting through an entire take. Remember, being in sync, it's singing the same words at the same time for the entire song. So there's a little bit of cutting and pasting, and we can do that. But it was all, the live performance is singing into the same mic, and,
Yeah, my 13-year-old son is a huge Beatles fan, and he's just delighted that he's found this trove of treasure trove of stuff on YouTube of all the kind of bloopers and the outtakes, and the John and Paul trying to get through This Boy, remembering when to sing This Boy and when to sing That Boy, and just getting it blatantly wrong so many times.
Right. Yeah. When you hear a record, you're hearing like the distillation. There's a lot of errors that happen before you get that final product. And so, but yeah, I like when you have musicians who are like great, improvisers, listeners and all that. I like putting the pressure of like not putting everyone in isolation booths. And, we did that with Orchids and Violence, where the band was Noam Pickilney, Sarah Giroux, Brittany Haas, Mike Bubb, myself. And it's like,
what a band.
I know. And so we recorded that live to 4-track tape in that same room, where Sarah and Noam were actually playing into the same microphone, recorded to 1 track of tape. There's not only is there no fixing, but there's no like blending or changing the levels of the instrument after the fact. You're just counting on the musicians listening to one another and understanding how it all fits together. And, with a band like that, they all understand. And, the music can benefit from, putting that sort of pressure on it. But in a lot of other situations, you wouldn't want to put that sort of pressure on. But I like making recordings that try to capture more of the energy of a live performance. And to me, that's part of it, is like not giving yourself the chance to fix much after the fact.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about using the same space for other records on your new label, Wild Geranium. And there's another record you put out recently, which is also a tribute record of sorts, but of a very different nature.
Yeah, that in December of 25, I released an EP called Fables, which was a remake or reimagining of 6 songs from Fables of the Reconstruction, which is an R.E.M. album from 1985. So it was celebrating its 40th anniversary. And that we did basically with the Bluegrass band. It was with Jacob Jolliff on mandolin, Alex Hargraves on fiddle, Eric Olivar on bass. And that was my sort of Brooklyn quartet that we've been working together quite a bit for a while. And then we added Duncan Wickel on cello and also bouzouki on some tracks, and harmony vocals from Jefferson Hamer, who's from the Murphy Beds, and Anais Mitchell, and amazing kind of folk and Irish singer, and then Sean Cale from this indie rock band called the Next Great American Novelist. But we adapted these R.E.M. songs, which I grew up with, to a bluegrass instrumentation, and recorded it again like live in that same space. So that was sort of a different exploration of the Southern Gothic.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it, actually. So what's next for the trilogy then?
Well, I feel like I'm done doing tribute records for a little while. These 2 back to back, the Jim and Jesse and the R.E.M., it's hard to, couldn't be much more different, except for both being, kind of outstanding examples of Southern music, and culture. But, I'm looking to kind of I'm probably going to be recording, some, combination of original and trad music. I've been planning for a while a mandocello and drums EP. Working with Kid Millions, who's the drummer from this experimental rock band called Oneida, who I started working with for the release of Orchids and Violence, which was that was 2016. That was in a double record where the first disc was all acoustic. It was all bluegrass, and that was the band I was telling you about with Noam and Sarah and Brittany and Bub. And then the disc 2 was all the same songs in the same order, but done in kind of an experimental electric, reimagining of that same material. And on that electric side of the record, I played the drums myself, but I didn't want to do that live. So we started working with this guy, Kid Millions, whose name is John Colpitz, amazing drummer, just incredible improvising musician. But, so we performed that music up until the pandemic. And then, so I've been wanting to, get back together with him and do some more folk based stuff. And, I've been listening to a lot more of, kind of the Brit folk, stuff, and being a bit more inspired by stuff like Pentangle and, Richard and Linda Thompson. So there'll be a little bit of a flavor of that, I think, but also combined with some, original stuff I've been writing.
Excellent. I mean, that sounds like, yet another in the classic tradition of mandocello and drum duet records.
Oh, yeah.
Do we need another one?
Right, right. Yes, the craze that's sweeping the nation. Yeah, Tony Trischka jokes about that when he does the bass banjo duet. It's the new craze.
Well, looking forward to hearing that one. And really, really enjoying the duet record. It's a lot of fun. It's got wonderful energy to it. And yeah, it's great to talk to you again.
Thank you. Yeah, nice talking to you.
Bluegrass Jamalong is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas.